Mr. Speaker, if we could switch gears for a bit onto the tax reform plan and benefit from your experience with the Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997, which you presided over as Speaker. What are the consequences downstream to economic growth? The JCT scored this as less than 10 bips of annual pickup in GDP. Historical examples have been much higher. What's your analysis?
Well, every time we've done this, the Joint Committee on Taxation has been wrong, with the singular exception of when Ken Keyes was in charge and forced them to do dynamic modeling. Look, if you have a bunch of bureaucrats who have no idea how capitalism works, they have no idea how entrepreneurialism works, they have no idea what incentives do for you because they're bureaucrats. They're sitting around gathering a check. They go, well, why would this change things? We got a terrible score for Reagan in '81. We got a terrible score for what we did in '97. Both times we launched huge amounts of growth. Remember, we passed the largest capital gains tax cut in history, and the system exploded with economic growth. Reagan passed 3 years of tax cuts and launched what was 20 years of economic growth. I think there are 2 things going on right now that are very exciting, that in fact and one in spirit. The 2, in fact, are the deregulation process, and I've talked at length with the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors about this. I think they're going to get a half point or a point of economic growth just out of deregulation because they're stripping out all of these stupid rules and all these expenses.
I agree.
Second, the tax cut's going to give them, I think, another %. And finally, there's a spirit thing. Donald Trump's an entrepreneur. He feels like an entrepreneur. He's doing entrepreneurial things. His cabinet is filled with entrepreneurs. What do you get? You get confidence among investors, confidence among small business. All of that leads you to more economic growth. I'd be very surprised if the Joint Committee isn't off by probably $2 trillion over the next decade.
I think I agree with you, Mr. Speaker. On the corporate side, corporate rates are going to really have an impact on the broad economy. But the individual side of this tax plan is a little messier in terms of the elimination of the deductions and the elimination of the state and local deduction in particular. So given the fact that individuals, certainly the top 10%, pay 70% of the tax, are they cutting taxes on individuals enough, certainly at the high end, the people who actually spend money and pay taxes?
Well, look, I know that when we learned that Senator Schumer last year took $58,000 in state and local tax deductions, we understood why he was busy defending the rich. But the fact is, if you're a fiscal conservative, you don't mind having a system that is fairer to the whole country and not just propping up New York, Connecticut, and California. And the fact is, yes, if you're very, very wealthy and you're deeply invested in New York and you're living in New York City, you have a huge deduction you're about to lose. On the other hand, if you're very, very wealthy, you probably own a lot of stock. And these kind of corporate rates, as you pointed out, these kind of corporate rate cuts are going to be very, very good for economic growth and very good for corporations. So you're going to more than, I'm not very worried about somebody worth $500 million who's now going to have to pay their own state and local property tax. They're going to make more than enough out of the rise in the economy, which is going to bring them substantial increase in assets.
Yeah, I just wonder, Dagan, if there's going to be pushback on this, by voters. After a while, seeing, oh, gosh, look at my taxes going up so much.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, this could be a death spiral to places like New York City, and somebody's economic situation is not going to get better unless they move.
Wait, it's not a death spiral for New York City. It just means you have to elect a mayor who believes in free enterprise, cuts taxes, has better contracts with the unions.
You're going to lose conservative voters in a lot of these states. If you don't cut you got to do what the Journal says. If you get rid of the state and local tax deduction, cut the top rate more than the Senate and the House have.
They're working on that now. You think we'll see a lower top rate, Newt?
Probably not, but is my guess. But you may see a slightly higher deductibility for property tax.
Will Franken resign today? You think, Newt? You think Franken resigns today?
Well, I don't think he should.